Welcome to this episode of the Customer-Centric Retailing Podcast, a forum for retail leaders to discuss industry trends, challenges, and opportunities.
This is Anil.
And this is Fabi, and each episode we invite some of the brightest minds in the industry to discuss the future of customer centricity, with topics ranging from the rise of e-commerce to brick-and-mortar operations, to omni-channel technology to retail culture, and how all of these elements come together to create customer-centric retailing. Today we have with us Nicole Reyhle, founder and publisher of Retail Minded. Nicole is a frequent guest and contributor to various media outlets that include the Today Show and Forbes, and is the author of the book Retail 101, The Guide to Managing and Marketing Your Retail Business. Welcome to the podcast, Nicole. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Nicole, I'm really excited to have you here, have opportunity to record a podcast with you, just because of your activities with small business. But I'll let you speak about what you do more.
I've been a huge advocate of small businesses for more or less forever. Even as a little girl, I remember shopping my local Main Street with my mom and really trying to understand the economic impact of how retail impacts the community and so forth. So I'm such a fan, and I'm thrilled to join you guys today.
It's great to have you. And, for sure, small businesses, especially now and as a result of the pandemic, I think it's never been more important than it is right now to support small businesses. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But before we jump in, why don't we start with you just giving our audience a little intro to yourself and kind of your background to get us started.
Absolutely. So I studied the business of retail in college, which a lot of people don't even know what they want to study in college. But I knew very, very early on that I was passionate about the business of commerce. Since, of course, I'm aging myself here, but since I was in college, retail's evolved from physical brick and mortar to e-commerce to many other commerce platforms, as you guys know better than most, including social selling and everything else. So I continue to study that, and I'm just very grateful to dive into the research of commerce all the time and support the general business at large.
Great. I think, there's so many different things that we could talk to you today, but I thought I would begin with a really broad but difficult question for you. And that is, what does an excellent customer experience in retail mean to you? What do you think that actually looks like nowadays?
So I believe an excellent customer service scenario or general just customer experience typically falls back on what I look at the 3 C's of red carpet customer service. So whether I'm virtual or in store, I want to feel like I'm getting a red carpet treatment as a consumer. I don't want to feel as if I'm being shuffled off or pushed away or dismissed or overlooked. I want to truly feel as if my attention is worthy of their attention and vice versa. And so I've always said, treat your customers as if they're stars, so to speak, not because stars deserve more attention, but because the society and world we live in, they simply get more attention. So give them that attention, and then have standards. What is your royal treatment? So treat them like stars and give them royal treatment. So I want royal treatment as a customer. I want to feel as if I'm uniquely experiencing something specific to whatever brand, retailer, merchant business I'm supporting. And that's going to look different from everybody because every business has their own representation, their own branding, right? But royal treatment, what does royal treatment mean? It means that there's expectations, there's standards. Royalty actually does have standards in place. And I think every retailer, merchant, online seller, brick and mortar alike should also have standards in place. And the final piece to that puzzle is get their autographs. Even as a consumer, if I'm not making their purchase and getting that quote unquote autograph, giving them an autograph as in a transaction, I've purchased something, traditional autograph in retail would mean you're signing a credit card signature, but we know that that is expanded well beyond credit cards nowadays. We can play digitally and other ways as well, but we can also stay connected via email marketing, different ways. As a customer myself, I want to experience all 3 of those touch points. I want to feel like a star. I want to experience royal treatment, and I want to give them my autograph because that means that they've solidified, they've succeeded in treating me with that red carpet customer service that I think every retailer should aim to do.
Nicole, so, I have a question there. I totally agree with you that, the retailer should be delivering that customer service that you mentioned. My question is that now that the customers have access to so much information, the same when they are talking to the retailer trying to buy something, customer already knows that where this same item is available for less money. How can retailer, brick and mortar retailer particularly, uh, deliver that level of service and still compete with uh, particularly online, but any other off-price retailer, because the other retailer is delivering the same item for much less money because that's how they do the business. So what do you think? How would a small business deal with this price competition scenarios?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's reality of how consumers shop and how retailers behave. And I think that actually does go back to what are your standards as a business? What are you doing to be more memorable, to be stronger in that customer care, to ease the transaction so that your customer is willing to say, I'll spend whether it's a few pennies more, a few quarters more, a few dollars more, whatever it might be. A customer is willing to feel attached more to you as a brand than just a product. And when consumers make purchases, that's really the difference it's coming down to. They feel a sentiment to certain companies and they lack sentiment to other companies. And when they have a sentiment, it's either going to be a good one or a bad one, right? So you want to work for that good one because they're willing to spend a little more with you in that case.
I'm curious, specifically talking about the pandemic and kind of the way that customer experience is changing. I know that you have a lot of experience talking about how customers shop and why they shop and what makes that experience great. And I'm curious because the pandemic has really demonstrated, I think, that brick and mortar retail still holds a really important role. Customers are literally lining outside of a store when the store reopens, when they could be shopping online. So why are they doing that, right? If what they say in the news outlets about a brick and mortar apocalypse or a retail apocalypse were true, then we wouldn't see people lining outside on the streets, right? So I'm curious, why do you think that is? Why do you think that brick and mortar continues to be popular and that we do see these long queues? What do you think draws people to that in person or human experience when it comes to shopping?
What a great question. It's one of my favorite questions, actually, because I'm a huge believer that consumers often shop based on what I refer to as shoppertainment. They want to be entertained, engaged, informed, and they don't want to do that as a solo experience all the time. So, purchasing online, although there's some interactive opportunities, it's a very much a solo journey, whereas your in-store experience lends itself to that shoppertainment where you're being engaged by other consumers. You're visually enticed by things you may have never looked at before because it's just in your eyesight, right? You're communicating whether it's with friends or family that you might be shopping with or store staff that's supporting you. So I'm a huge believer that consumers crave that. And of course, coming hopefully out of this COVID centric world we've lived in for so long now, customers more so, even though they're certainly appreciating the online opportunities, they still want those in-person experiences as well. So that shoppertainment component is not to be overlooked. It's a very valuable component to retail.
So, Nicole, with this whole COVID scenario, particularly, we've seen that more and more consumers have come to use digital, all these technologies for their shopping, right? So now, customer wants to check out if the product is in stock at the store before they walk to the store or drive to the store. Also, in many cases, they want to place an order and go pick up in the store. The major retailers, the big companies, they have invested heavily in technology to deliver all these digital experiences to their customers. How do you see these small retailers which are generally independent, single one or two shops, how do you see them serving their own customers? Particularly, these technologies are not so easy access. They are not so cheap. They are expensive. How would the small retailers get access to these technologies? And do you think the customers would download their apps or go to their website just because for one or two transactions?
It's such a struggle because independent retailers in particular are often intimidated by technology, even though as consumers themselves, they're using it in their own transaction journeys, whether it's shopping at a grocery store or another merchant. And so keeping that in mind, I really encourage these smaller businesses in particular to look at what they're currently using and then look at what integrations exist within those platforms. Because when you look at what already exists, you can often avoid unnecessary expenses. So if you're already integrated, whether it's a point of sale system or an e-commerce platform, from there, look to see who their integrated partners are and begin to unravel what would make the most sense to support your existing business. The reality is not all technologies will make sense for all businesses, but consumers might still be engaged in technologies or path to purchase journeys that you're not as a small business. And at the end of the day, you have to consider what you're willing to sacrifice. Are you willing to sacrifice being an absent presence in part of those customer journeys? Or are you willing to sacrifice a few extra dollars per month, more than a few sometimes, to build your brand and expand those selling avenues so you can support retail, the journey of retail and your brand in general at a larger scale?
Yeah, recently I've had few conversations with few people who are working on. In fact, you might know Chris Walton, right? He has the Urban Rooster marketplace started, right? So where small retailers have come and they publish their product inventory online, and they are able to capture the orders from their online site marketplace, and then the order gets routed to these small businesses for fulfillment. What a fantastic idea! I like it. What do you think? Does this encourage small retailers to bring them on board in this marketplace? Do you think these retailers would be confident? I mean, like, do you think they see a risk that the retailer might see the risk that they might lose their customers to the marketplace? Also, right? And then the one other thing I have is like the big retailers have opportunity to access their inventory across all the stores. They have like 150 or 200 stores, or some retailers have 500 or 1,000 stores. Each store has access through endless aisle technology to all the inventory across their network. Now, do you think retailers who will onboard on these marketplaces, will they publish their inventory, but also will they access inventory of other retailers in the same network to save the sale, particularly when you have a style but don't have a certain size that your customer wants?
Yeah, the endless aisle conversation is very complex because there's obviously so much opportunity within it, but the challenge becomes greater as well. The challenges that you face during that endless aisle experience are often a lot larger as well. And certainly data technology can help navigate some of that. But I do think at the end of the day, as a business decision maker, we have to identify what makes the most sense for our immediate short-term and long-term goals. And sometimes I personally believe, and this may not be right for everyone, but I personally believe that for some brands, it's okay to say, I don't need to be a part of that. The endless aisle transaction journey experience is not something I need to be a part of. It's not my customer. It's not my battle, so to speak. I don't want it. I don't need it, because there are other marketplaces and other experiences as well that they can still be within that might cater more to their preferences in selling. Now, to scale a business, of course you want to be a part of this endless aisle, but that depends on how much you want to scale your business, because there's many ways to scale a business in the business of commerce. And sometimes it's a part of the endless aisle experience and sometimes it's not.
I'm curious, kind of going back to your favorite question, actually, Nicole, which is about why people buy. When we're thinking about the pandemic in general, even though people are getting vaccinated and it's, hopefully kind of coming to an end, it's not going to be over for a while, in the sense that for quite a while, people aren't going to feel quite as comfortable as they did before, kind of going in store and having those same types of shopping experiences. So it's going to be kind of a hybrid model for a while. And I do think a lot of people have been talking for years about how everything's moving online and less so in store. And for a long time, that was a little bit, alarmist. And I think it still is to a certain degree. But I do think that it's accelerated the shift to e-commerce because people are going to feel less comfortable going in store. I remember before the pandemic, if I went into a Zara, it was like shoulder to shoulder, couldn't even move. And I can't imagine being in that kind of environment right now. So I'm curious, going back to that conversation about why people buy, how can people capitalize on different factors that go through people's minds about why they want something when they aren't in store and they don't get to, touch it and feel it in store? How can they kind of mimic those same experiences that really makes you want to buy something, operating in a hybrid or mostly online environment as well?
There's so many cool, fun, interactive technologies that allow people to be a part of that online entertaining experience as a customer and a brand, being able to get connected and feel as if you're able to understand the product. Whether it's your 360 angle and you can see products from a 360 angle, or maybe it's some technologies allow the customer to even almost inject themselves into the product, like with makeups and hair features where you can like almost personalize it to you uniquely. Those are really great ways for businesses to capture their customer attention and make it feel more personalized. And I think that's the key takeaway. You would want to aim to have a more personalized experience offering from your brand so that the customer feels connected to you despite not having a physical experience. So to your point, having that hybrid as well. I love some of what emerged during COVID, where physical brick and mortar stores took advantage of social selling platforms such as like Comment Sold, where they can introduce technologies to sell directly from social media via video selling, where you're using your store or physical space as a warehouse. You're maybe even having a model or trying clothing on yourself if it's an apparel store and sort of highlighting the details of it. And customers are able to just be on Facebook or be on Instagram and say, yes, I want that. They comment and boom, it's sold through that technology. Those are also really great ways to blend, right? The hybrid of blending your physical and your online. And I think we're going to see more of that because what happened during COVID was retailers realized whether they're online or offline or both, there are ways to blend, and that blending became much more accommodating to some of their customers. Every customer is different, though. We already know that. So we do have to keep in mind the preferences of consumers. What generation are they? What's most comfortable to them? How do they prefer to shop? And depending on who your target market is, that's going to vary as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a follow up on that. I think, kind of what Anil was saying at the beginning of the episode is there is so much competition nowadays. And so, a big challenge for retailers and small businesses as well is how do you capture that attention when there's so many different ways to look? And then how do you keep the attention and keep them as a loyal customer for you? Especially when you don't have the chance to really interact with them in person, because I think once they have a chance to go into your store, meet the associates, it creates more of that personal relationship and, in an easier way than you can do it online. So I'm curious what your opinion is specifically on loyalty programs and how retailers can kind of best structure those loyalty programs to maximize sales, first of all, and then, primarily gain those lifelong consumers that really feel something for the brand.
Loyalty programs are such a huge advantage for businesses to leverage. And I'm finding more and more point of sale companies are integrating them into the platforms to make it that much easier, as well as e-commerce companies as well, because data tells us they work. So when it comes to loyalty, I think that the customer benefits from feeling a connection and an appreciation to a business, okay? And that goes back to the customer sentiment. And if a customer has the sentiment of you care as a business about them, they're going to be more inclined to want to support you. And I think that's the key takeaway. But the real takeaway is probably that retailers need to just forget about just sharing all the time, like, oh, we got this new inventory. Look at us, look at us, look at us. But rather, hey, we're thinking of you. This can benefit you. Or how can this support your best interests? So when we think of loyalty programs, I like to look at them as be loyal to your customer versus your customer loyal to you. If you are loyal to your customer, the customer will then in turn be loyal to you. But if a customer has to be loyal to you first for you to then be loyal to them, that's a backwards scenario here. It's really about a twist of perspective. Retailers need to understand that if we can be loyal to our customers, they'll want to be loyal to us. And so, what does loyalty look like from a business to a consumer? And as a consumer myself, so taking off my sort of retail thought leadership hat and rather just taking it from a consumer perspective, I'm loyal to those companies that are trying to offer me something that will best benefit me. Okay. I can't believe that it's just going to reward them, but rather instead it's going to reward me. Well, ways to do that include, of course, saving money, right? Or making things easier, or giving me an experience that I might not have otherwise. There's a great boutique. I live in Denver, Colorado. There's a great boutique that, up until COVID at least, they would quarterly do a really fun sort of social party dedicated to the top 50 customers. And it's a smaller boutique, but their top 50 customers. That can vary, by the way, every quarter because their customers might change and their data tells them who those top 50 are based on dollars spent. But they don't look at it like, hey, you spent the most, come see us, but rather you've supported us the most, we want to support you. And they always do these fantastic events. So I really do think it comes down to the business offering benefits to the customers first through loyalty, and then as a result, the customer becomes more loyal. Hopefully that makes sense.
So Nicole, this is interesting, really, really interesting. So I have I'm like thinking money more and more right now. So I have another question: is that we definitely have a loyalty customer and loyalty programs. Now going forward, clearly it seems that the more and more retailers will stay lean on how much they stock, how much inventory they hold. So what do you think? How would the retailing change? Do you think what I said is going to happen first? Like, are retailers going to reduce the inventory they carry, and how is that going to impact on the action? I mean, like we are used to having a season start with everything at the list price, and then markdowns, and then markdown, and then the clearance sale. So there's a pattern that we are used to. So do you think with the retailers reducing the inventory they hold, this pattern, the cycle of markdowns would be shortened, and maybe we'll do one markdown and be able to sell out most of it?
Yeah, great point, Anil. I absolutely think that the markdown strategy will take a shift. And I actually think there'll be less markdowns because as inventory becomes tighter and supply and demand is changed as a result to actual logistics of goods in our world, our global economy, and also just the general retail buying attitude. Some of the retailers are buying less because they just want to sell what they sell and be done, right? They don't want to deal with reorders. So less markdown opportunity with that perspective because retailers are going to be like, we're going to sell what we sell, move on to the next, right? So I think that's really just spot on with what's probably going to happen here as we go into spring and summer and fall and, soon enough 2022. I definitely think that customers have also shifted their understanding of purchase. They realize that not everything is going to be readily available as it has in the past, even if they don't understand the total logistics of retail and commerce and buying and supply. They still know things are coming and they're going, and they're not always returning when it comes to inventory. So it's sort of a buy now experience for them.
So, Nicole, do you think, in that sense, because the moment these retailers, particularly the small retailers I'm talking about, the moment they have placed order for certain, inventory, the products, do you think they should be able to publish all that product online or in their store in certain ways so they can start talking about those products, maybe show a few pieces in the showroom and start taking orders? So that by the time the inventory arrives, they already have so much orders captured and ready to fulfill. Do you think that should come up soon, or customer would be more willing to do that going forward?
Well, I actually think that's part of the branding of a business. If that's how they want to sell, that becomes part of their sales strategy. Other businesses might benefit to say at noon on Friday we are releasing, our new inventory. So I think that one versus the other isn't necessarily better. What I do think is that putting anticipation out there to the customer, building enthusiasm, that's what's exciting about it. And communication is always so important from between retailers and customers. So I think we benefit from that as well, that strategy, Anil. I think that each business needs to consider what makes the most sense for them, whether it comes down to their technology management of it or their overall branding. But I think both could be very beneficial, both ways.
I'm curious, Nicole, I think as we're talking about these different experiences and these different things, we're talking about making the experience more personalized and making it more seamless and more frictionless and loyalty programs and all of these things. And I think that can be, sometimes it's easier said than done in the sense that it can be difficult to create a great loyalty program or to create a personalized experience or to create all of these things if you don't have the data that you can look at and say, okay, this is what my customers respond to, or this is how my customers are engaging with my brand. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on, how retailers can best leverage big data to gain those valuable insights that ultimately enhance the customer experience, both in store but also online.
I am a huge fan of data. Data allows for clarity within a business that the human eye alone simply cannot see. And with data, businesses are able to become more proactive in their efforts. Everything from store staffing to inventory management to marketing to social media efforts. I mean, truly, data touches everything we do in terms of action. So when we use data, we actually review data. We then analyze, compare data based on our historic opportunities, external opportunities. We can then become more proactive in order to become more profitable. And I think that's the key. When you're using data to be proactive, it allows you to become more profitable. I always say that, today's technologies equals tomorrow's sales. And it's really leveraging those technologies and the data that the technologies provide to deliver the sales that you want to get tomorrow, right? So for any business decision maker who is not currently capturing and also analyzing data, they are absolutely missing out on profit opportunity.
Definitely, I definitely agree with that analysis, and I think what might be useful for our audience is, what are those data points or those metrics that you think are the most important to keep track of? Because I think there's so much data out there at this point that sometimes it can be easy to get lost in it as well, as opposed to really using it to your advantage. So, what do you think are the main kind of data points or metrics that retailers should look for?
Well, at a very minimum, I always tell people look at your Google Analytics. If you're not already, identify what's happening online in terms of where your traffic is coming from, whether it's to your website or from your email. Like, let's say you're using email marketing, what's happening from your email after they start to click through it. And you can gain a lot of this beyond Google Analytics, of course. Like, who's your email provider? Are you looking at the data from there? Email is still one of the number one drivers of commerce, both in store and online. So make sure you're analyzing all email efforts that you do. So if you're putting out a mass email every Wednesday, for example, or for that matter, if you're not, why aren't you? Okay, so it's like, look at the data from email, look at the data from Google Analytics, look at the data, of course, from your inventory management. And I also think social media can't be avoided. Social media provides a lot of intelligence to us, whether it's in terms of like one post was more popular than another post. These are the details I want them to dive into, though. So when you say the metrics, to me, it really comes down to the engagement. So what is the engagement of each of your efforts? Are you losing customers on some things versus another? Why is that? Look at the history of that. Is it the time of the day, or is it the type of communication you used? A lot of time your effort might be equal in terms of time and even investment, but your communication strategy is wildly different. Maybe you're starting to understand your brand voice better when you start to look at these details. So really look at the engagement of each data point of your customer engagement, as well as of course, any details that lead you to a transaction, right? So we want to know what's leading customers to transaction. And those data points, of course, are so strong and important. I mean, I could talk about data all day, so I won't continue, but there's really so much to say about data. But if we have to narrow it down to just a couple things at first, I would say definitely look at the engagement of your top performance drivers. Again, that would probably be email marketing, your general Google Analytics, social media, and your point of sale inventory management.
Yeah, I can tell that you're passionate about this subject in particular. And I really like what you said there about engagement, because I think a lot of retailers really focus on what we call vanity metrics, and it's really more about reach than anything. And the metrics or data points that you focus on are a lot more results oriented. And I think that's definitely where retailers should focus. Not that reach isn't important. There's definitely an argument to be made for that as well in long-term branding. But I think engagement metrics are super important as well. I think actually we can leave it there with that great piece of advice for retailers. So we want to thank you so much for your insights, and it's been such a pleasure having you on. But as is tradition on this podcast, we always end with our guests telling our audience what they can look forward to from you, and how they can keep up with you.
Well, thank you guys for having me. First of all, I really appreciate having the conversations I've had with you in the past and today's conversation as well. So I actually, throughout COVID, dove into a little passion project myself with my daughter, and we wrote a book. It comes out April 15th, 2021. It's called Shadow Siblings, and it's about the story. It's a children's book. It's a story of a little girl whose brother has a medical condition, and through the journey, she realizes she's not alone. There's lots of families and kids who also have siblings with challenges or disabilities. So that was a passion project I did during COVID. So for me, that's something to more immediately look forward to. It's shadowsiblings.com. It was a lot of fun, and I'll tell you what was really fun about it was it threw me on the other side of retail. Because from where I am right now, I'm always in research. But from that perspective, I'm actually in a place to, sell, right? So we need to promote, sell, market, communicate, all the things that all other decision makers are making. We get to do that too. I think the twist is I'm doing it with a 12-year-old, so that makes it a little bit more challenging. But that was a lot of fun. And then from Retail Minded and from the Independent Retailer Conference, we're really excited to return to Vegas physically, August 2021. Very excited for that. We'll be producing our Independent Retailer Conference on site at ASD Market Week. So we're thrilled to do that this upcoming August and hope to see a lot of you guys there. Definitely say hi if you're there.
Awesome. This is exciting. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to talk about the book, and as we share this podcast, we'll talk about that as well. And yeah, looking forward to that trade show. Probably we will be there. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, great. Thank you guys so much, and I'll touch base offline, and we can of course stay in touch.
Of course, yeah. We definitely encourage our audience to check out shadowsiblings.com and to keep up with Retail Minded. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you guys. Take care. Bye.
That's it for this episode of the Customer Centric Retailing Podcast featuring our special guest, Nicole Reyhle. Nicole is a big believer that the human aspect of shopping is what is going to keep bringing customers back in store. So retailers need to focus on making that in-person experience something to remember. She believes success often comes in the form of amazing personal relationships mixed with a firm grasp of data and analytics. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Please rate and review and recommend to a friend or fellow retail fanatic. This podcast is brought to you by Hot Wax Commerce.